I don't believe in the concept of strengths and weaknesses. Everything has context. I believe we have attributes, we have characteristics that we have to know. And in some contexts, those attributes are strengths, and in sometimes they're weaknesses. I am chronically disorganized, and I've always thought of this as a weakness. So I was at a networking event many years ago, and I met a guy, and he was like, "Simon, you're fantastic. Would love to work with you. Here's my card." And if I was organized, I'd be texting from the cab on the way home or emailing the next day when I get to work, of course. But I'm disorganized. I lost the business card almost immediately. 2 weeks later, I found the business card at the bottom of a briefcase. And so I emailed him. I said, "I don't know if you remember me. We met 2 weeks ago. I'd love to reconnect." And he wanted to work with me more because he thought I was busy. So is being disorganized a strength or a weakness? The answer is it depends. In that context, it was actually a strength. In different contexts, when somebody says, "I need you to get this done by this time," it can be a liability. So what stacking the deck means is putting yourself in situations where your attributes are more likely to reveal themselves as strengths, and try and avoid situations where your attributes are more likely to pull you back.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Carmichael, and I make these videos because in my first business, I struggled to stay afloat. I quit on my business partner, and the thing that kept me motivated, that kept me going, was studying the stories of famous, successful entrepreneurs. And in their stories, it gave me the hope, the drive, the ambition, the thinking that maybe I can do it too, that extra bit of belief. And I still need their stories today, and I'm honored to share them with you here as well. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Simon Sinek, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy.
So stacking the deck is not about cheating. It's about making sure that you're in the right place that make you strong and avoiding the places that make you weak. So for example, if you're bad at math, don't do jobs that require lots of math. Right?
Right. Yes.
It's I know it sounds trite, but
no, it's true.
It's sometimes that silly. I love working with others. I love working on teams, right? And so when a project comes up, I always make sure that I have a group that I can work with because I know I'll do better work. If I work by myself, it's more stressful and the work is a lower standard. And so I know that about me. I know that I like working with people. So I stack the deck. I try very hard to work at least with one other person, or to work on a team to complete a project, right?
Right.
As opposed to leave this to me, I'll get this done by myself. Some people, that is their strength, to work by themselves, not me.
Right.
So again, I try and stack the deck by working with people as often as possible when I have difficult things to do.
Rule number 2 is learn from other players.
I don't believe in the sense of competition. We live in a world where there's no such thing as winning business. It doesn't exist, right? Where two organizations who sell basically the same product for basically the same price, basically the same quality, can both be wildly successful simultaneously. There's no winning. And so when companies talk about their competition, to me it doesn't make sense, because a competitor is another player you want to try and beat, which means you spend too much time focusing on what they're doing, and you spend too much time comparing arbitrary metrics, whether it's profits or revenues or market share or number of properties or number of employees or whatever it is, they're arbitrary. You get to pick what you're making the comparison, and you're all proud of yourself when you win at the end of the year, but the game doesn't end. I prefer the concept of a worthy rival. And a worthy rival is another, they may or may not be in your industry, but it's another player in the game who does one or many things better than you. In other words, their strengths reveal to you your weaknesses. And you can study them, you can be grateful for them, but trying competing against them is pointless. But the whole idea is that the only true competitor in the game of business is yourself. How do we improve what we're doing? And learn from those who do similar things to us rather than trying to beat them.
How do we focus on what we can do better versus how we can beat our competitors?
Right. Well, as I said before, you can pick your own worthy rivals. You can pick any company for any reason and say they're better than us. What can we learn from them? I'll give you a real life story that really captured this for me, and it's in the book, but I'll tell it to you. I spoke at a education summit for Microsoft. And then a few months later, I was invited to speak at an education summit for Apple. At the Microsoft Summit, this is back in the Steve Ballmer days. In the Microsoft Summit, the vast majority of the presentations by the executives spent most of their time talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Summit, 100% of the presentations were how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with beating their competition, the other one was obsessed with advancing their mission. At the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the Zune when it was a thing. This was Microsoft's response to the iPod. And this little piece of technology, I have to say, was really very, very good. It was quite a good little piece of technology. It didn't work on an Apple, so I couldn't use it. That's a different problem. But it was very good. So at the end of my Apple talk, I was sharing a taxi with an Apple executive, and I couldn't help myself. I just had to stir the pot. And I turned to him, I go, you know, Microsoft gave me their new Zune, and it is so much better than my iPod Touch. And he turned to me and he said, I have no doubt. And the conversation was over. Because he understood, this was an infinite-minded organization, he understood that sometimes your competitor will do something better than you, and sometimes you'll be better than them. There's no such thing as winning or losing. There's only ahead and behind. And where Microsoft was obsessed with beating Apple, Apple was obsessed with outdoing itself. And so the great irony is just a couple years after that, Apple released the iPhone. So where Microsoft was obsessing with how to make a better iPod, Apple was on to the next thing, didn't even care. And that's the whole idea, which is absolutely study and learn from the other players. You see, I don't even call them competitors. The other players in your industry. See what they're doing better. Like I said, it reveals your weaknesses and say, we can do better than ourselves. Grow. Eventually, they no longer become worthy of comparison anymore because you advance yourselves. But the whole idea is Apple was thinking about what they could do next, not how they could beat Microsoft to get more market share for an iPod.
So learn from others and how you can be better.
Absolutely. Like I said, their strengths reveal to you your weaknesses, and that's a gift.
Rule number 3 is be a good listener.
When you find darkness, however you want to define your darkness, you feel alone, you feel like nobody can help you feel like you have no agency, you feel like a lack of control. And the first thing that a lot of us should do is reach out to a friend and say, I'm struggling, or I need help, or I'm lonely, or I'm depressed, or I'm sad, whatever the feeling is. And that person, do your friends, do your colleagues, do your teachers have the skills to know how to hold space. So the first mistake people make is they try and fix. Don't try and fix. It's not a fixing thing, It's like I had a bad day at the gym. Nothing to fix, nothing to fix. But then do you know how to listen? Do you know how to hold space? And I think one of the reasons more of us are struggling with mental fitness is because we ourselves lack the skills to help our friends who are struggling with mental fitness. And the more that we as a society are equipped to help each other, the more that there are other people there to help us. So, and I have a rule with my friends. My rule is no crying alone. My close friends all know this, and we all obey it. Like I'll get a call from somebody who's a significant person in the world that people know who they are, and they'll call me and say, do you have a minute? And I'll be like, yeah, what's up? They're like, I think I need to cry. I'm like, go. What's on your mind? And they'll tell me what's on their mind and they will cry. And that's my rule. My rule with my friends is no crying alone. Because if you're at the point of absolute frustration, exhaustion, whatever it is that you can't hold it in, I'd rather you call me or one of us and you do it with somebody. You should never cry alone. And so I'm really good when I'm in a place like this of calling somebody and telling them, because I don't want to go through this alone. And some of my friends do have the skills where they can say, how do you feel? Oh, this is how I feel. That must be really frustrating. Yeah, it's really hard. Tell me more about that. Well, I'm sort of going through this and that. And they know how to hold space. That's all I need. I need somebody to sit in the mud with me. Don't need them to fix me or clean me off or give me a towel. I just need them to sit in the mud with me so I don't feel alone when I'm sitting in the mud. And I think it's our responsibility to be able to have that skill set to do it for our friends and the people we love or our colleagues.
Rule number 4 is overcome the fear of change.
There's this phrase that's thrown around so often that people fear change. No, they don't. People fear sudden change.
Yeah.
And you have to remember, many of the people in your organization, many of them have been doing the job the way they've always been doing it for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And now we're going to say, okay, it's going to be all different. The fear is not from the change. The fear is from the unfamiliarity. The fear is that I know how to do that really, really well. And I fear that I don't know how to do that. And I will feel insecure. I'll be off my game. I'll lose my credibility. And you just have to put yourself in their shoes. The fear is being humiliated. I don't understand the jargon. It's all new. It's a whole host of things. So empathy is king. Empathy is king, and not assuming that everybody knows. And people come along with new directions at different paces. We kind of assume it's like getting into shape. Everybody goes to the gym, but some people get into shape quicker than others. There's no rule. It's just how it works. And it's the same here. Some people come along lickety-split, and some people are just a little slower. The ones that are potentially destructive are the ones that are so afraid that they actually put up barriers and become obstreperous. They actually resist the change to the point where they're clinging onto the past so desperately that they may accidentally sabotage themselves. And those are the ones that we have to have difficult conversations with. We sit down and say, I need to have a difficult conversation with you. I get a sense that you're struggling because everything we're trying to do, all you do is say no. Yep. And I understand it's difficult, but we got to talk about this because the company is going in this direction and I want you to be a part of this. But I am patient. And to have that conversation privately with empathy, that someone can come clean and say, I'm scared, because then you can hold their hand, So I think empathy is actually the core to helping people manage change.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5 is have empathy.
When you're an infinite-minded player and your boss is a finite player, do not hate them. Do not blame them. Have empathy for them. Remember, we don't know where they worked before. We don't know what conditions that they worked in before. We don't know how they were beaten down. Remember that they've made it through the ranks. They've made it to their position following the finite rules of the game. And so when you tell them you have to change, why would they change? Like, what got me here worked just fine. Now, they're ignoring the fact that they're highly stressful. They struggle with trust. They may not sleep well. Like, all of those things that cause personal stress are usually because we're playing by the wrong rules for the game we're in. That's why you would be stressed. It is stressful. So have empathy, care about them, worry about them, concern yourself with them, go to them, help them, offer them. And they will start to see that maybe there's a different way of thinking about it. But you can only lead a horse to water. If somebody just refuses to come, then just back off. They have to want to make the shift themselves. They have to want to make the shift themselves. This is my friend George Flynn always says, the first thing to become a leader is you have to want to be a leader. Like, if you don't want to be one, there's nothing I can do. So, there's a funny joke. How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? 1, but the light bulb has to really want to change. Same thing. Somebody has to want to change. But we have to have empathy for them. So practice being an infinite person. That circle of trust that you build, you don't have to be the senior person to build it. You can build it for somebody who's more senior than you. Make them feel safe.
Rule number 6 is think positively.
Emotions are good. It means you're human. Like I said, I believe in mental fitness, not mental health. That like your body, you have to work out, you have to eat well, you have to sleep all the time. It's not something you do and then you're done. We've used that analogy before, you and I, which is what the infinite game is, which is it's like I want to be healthy. Okay, well, you're going to have to do it for the rest of your life. It's not an event. And our mental health, our mental fitness is exactly the same, which is it's constant and it's ups and downs. And it's only a challenge or you need to start involving professionals if you get stuck. You know, like if you get stuck in sadness and you cannot get out of it, that's a different conversation. If you get stuck in depression and you cannot get out of it, if you get stuck in loneliness and you cannot get out of it. And by the way, the thing that I love about human beings is we can have multiple conflicting feelings simultaneously. I am lonely and optimistic simultaneously. My optimism, you know, I pride myself on my optimism. My optimism has not diminished in the least. Optimism doesn't mean I can't sit in a dark tunnel. Optimism means that I believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even if that light is far away. I have an undying belief that the future is bright. This too will pass, right? That doesn't mean I enjoy it. It doesn't mean I want to be here. And I can be excited and I can hang out with my friends and I can have an amazing time with my friends and then go home and still feel lonely. Like, you can have simultaneous and conflicting feelings. That's allowed. In fact, it's normal. But I cannot stress. I think that the way that I manage this differently than most.
Rule number 7 is find your why.
There's no such thing as changing your why. Your why is something objective. It's who you are. It's who you are at your natural best. You know, we were all fully formed when we were young. We are products of our upbringing. And we can make tactical changes, but fundamentally who we are is who we are. And putting your why into words is putting that into words. So once it's written, you can tweak the language for sure and find nuance, but there's no changing it. So if you're changing it every year, it's probably not your why. But I can tell you a fun little exercise if you want to learn your why. I call it the friends test. Call a friend who you love, someone who you could call them at 3 o'clock in the morning, or they could call you at 3 o'clock in the morning and you would absolutely take the call. Do not do this with a spouse or a sibling. Those relationships are too close because they know you too well. Do it with a best friend and ask them this simple question. Why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy because you're asking them to put into words something that exists in the emotional part of their brain, the limbic brain, but that part of the brain doesn't control language, the neocortex. And so they're going to say, I don't know. Why are you asking me? And you say, come on, just humor me. And then weirdly, you stop asking the question why. You ask the question what. It elicits better answers. Come on, what specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what? And they'll start describing you. I don't know. I can trust you. You're smart. You're funny. And you play devil's advocate. Great. That's a lot of friends. What specifically is it about me? And they're going to go through a few rounds of hemming and hawing, and eventually they'll give up. And eventually they'll give up and start describing themselves. And this is what my friend said to me. I don't know, Simon. All I know is I can just sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you, and I feel inspired. And I got goosebumps. In fact, I'm getting them right now. And if you do this with multiple friends, you'll get very similar, if not the exact same answer, because what they're articulating is your value you have in the world, which is your why.
Rule number 8 is be true to yourself.
Purpose is foundational. It's not like I want to be the best or I want to be number one or I want to, those things are good and important and goals are valid and valuable. But that's not the reason you get out of bed in the morning. The reason your spouse loves you is not because you're the top salesperson. The reason your friends rely on you is not because of your knowledge of the product. Purpose is foundational, and it absolutely applies at work because who you are at home and who you are at work should be consistent. That's what we mean by authenticity. If you're different in both of these places, then in one of those two places, you're lying. We want to know who you are and show up as yourself. Now, that doesn't mean we can't be professional at work. Those two are, you can still be professional and be yourself. And fundamentally, when we are ourselves, we connect better, whether it's teammates or people or customers. We connect people like us who share our values and see the world the way we see it. We can't get along with everybody. And a great salesperson knows when there's not a good personality connection that they'll actually say to somebody else, you take this one. You can close this deal. I won't be able to, or you can get a better deal. And it's understanding that when we show up as our true selves, we're much better able to truly connect with people and inspire them to do the same, by the way. Remember, 100% of customers are people, and 100% of employees are people, and 100% of investors are people. And fundamentally, business is a human industry. If you don't understand people, you don't understand business. And we succeed as people when we work together. We are social animals who need each other. We need each other in hard times. We need each other in good times. And so the better we foster relationships internally and externally, this is the recipe for successful change and, quite frankly, success in anything we do.
Rule number 9 is look for a mentor.
at the end of the day, when you're young and junior in your career, it's the most confusing, exciting, wonderful, awful day of your life, right? Because now it's you. It's life's journey, right? You work your way up to 8th grade and you have to start again at 9th grade. You work your way up to senior and you have to start again as a freshman. You work your way up and you grad, and then now you're nothing again. But I think there are too many people who graduate school thinking that they have to have it all figured out on day one.
Yes.
And you don't. Because there's something wonderful about being junior inside a company, right? You probably don't have as many responsibilities as other people. You may or may not have a spouse. You probably don't have kids. The vast majority of people don't have kids at this time. In other words, you can do anything. You can go try stuff out. Also, your cost of living is a lot lower. And you can't really break anything at a company and bring the company down. This is the best, like if you're senior and you make a bad decision, you can break the whole company. When you're junior and you make a bad decision, maybe you'll lose a little bit of money, right? There's not much you can really do that'll break the company. And so this is an amazing opportunity to practice and learn and practice and learn. Find a mentor. And a mentor is not someone who is your champion, who will put in a good word for you so you get the promotion.
Right.
A mentor is somebody who's probably not even at your company, and if they are at your company, they don't have to be in your chain of command. There's somebody who likes you and you like them, and they believe in you, and they see maybe a little bit of themselves in you, and they want to see you do well, and they give you candid and honest advice. In other words, come to learn, come to be a better version of yourself. Too many people start off trying to prove that they are worthy of being there, trying to prove that they should be in charge, and yet everybody knows that you have no experience. We know. We saw your resume. Your resume says your GPA and what you graduated. You have no jobs.
Right.
You wrote it down here. Cafeteria is not like the thing we're thinking of. We took a bet on you because we liked you and you're a nice kid and we tried to form it, but we don't know. You got no experience.
Right.
So this is the best time to try things out and experiment and push the boundaries and make sure you're making friends and make sure you're taking care of others and make sure you find a mentor and enjoy the journey. If you take that route, you're more likely to be successful than not.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is continue serving others.
The greatest sense of purpose and meaning we can have in our lives is to serve those who serve others. Part of the deal that they made with me when I went, the general said, I want you to go and I want you to come back and tell us your insights. What you saw that we did well, what you saw weak, just tell us your insights. So about 2 weeks after I got home, I went back to Scott Air Force Base and was standing in a room full of all the brass, all the generals, the colonels, all the command from the mobility forces. And they just wanted me to report on what I saw. And I went through everything. And I wasn't sure if I was going to tell them about bringing home this flag-draped casket. That was the emotions were very raw still. And I'm not sure I wanted to do it or could do it. And I remembered I was reporting on everything else that I saw and the people I met and the things that I thought were amazing. And I took a pause and I decided to tell the story. And now, the emotions are right on the surface. And I tell the whole story in even more detail than I'm telling you now. And I got to the point where I choked up and I couldn't continue. I couldn't tell the story anymore. Now, if this was the private sector and I was standing on a stage telling this exact story, somebody in private sector would say to me, take your time. They would say, it's okay. That's what they would say to me, right? It's happened. Take your time, right? That's not what happened. I stood there completely choked up. I couldn't speak. And was one voice from the back of the room, the general. And he said, go on. Meaning, go on and we're with you. Right? And that's the difference between private sector and these wonderful people. In private sector, they say to you, take your time as if you're alone. Take all the time you need by yourself. And here, these people who understand what service truly means, they say, go forwards, go on, move forwards, you have no choice, and we will be with you. And that's what I learned from them. When my friends are struggling, I don't say, take your time. When my friends are struggling, I say, go on. When my friends are crying, I say, go on. The underlying message is, and I am here sitting in the mud with you. It is the greatest honor of my life. And because of that experience, that's where the book Leaders Eat Last came from. That experience was the impetus for that book. So when we talk about what the future looks like, I just want to live a life of service. I want to continue to serve those who serve others. And to meet people who live a life of service, I will do anything for them. I think there's an unwritten rule that when you meet someone who's devoted their life to serving those who serve others, that it is our responsibility to serve them. There's an unwritten rule. The reason I do so much pro bono stuff is because when I meet people who are on the side of good, on the side of service, I obey that unwritten agreement that I will be there for you and I will serve you and expect nothing in return. And if you want to bring it full circle back to relationships, when one person shows up in the relationship to serve you, you have the moral responsibility to serve them. Because to serve someone who serves others, they are serving you, which means we have to serve them. I live my life by that code.
Talk about competition a little bit, because my God, we're hyper focused on beating people, on being right, on competition. I'm afraid of it. I need to work harder. Talk about that a little bit, how we can shift that culture.
So my life and my work has been very much influeed by a philosopher named Dr. James Carse, who in the mid-1980s defined these two types of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. If there's a winner, necessarily there have to be losers. And there's always a beginning, a middle, and end to a finite game. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means you don't necessarily know who all the other players are, and new players can join at any time. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want. And the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. So we're players in infinite games every day of our lives, whether we know it or not. You can't win education. You can come in first for the finite amount of time you're at school, where we agree upon the time frames, the school year, and the metrics, grades. But nobody wins education, nobody wins learning, nobody wins healthcare, nobody wins global politics, and nobody wins business. But when you hear the language of so many people, they talk about being number one, being the best, and beating their competition. Based on what? Based upon what agreed upon objectives, metrics, or timeframes? And this is a problem. Because when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, when we play to win in a game that has no finish line, there are some very predictable and consistent outcomes. The big ones are the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, the decline of innovation. And when people become obsessed with beating their competitors in a game where there is actually no winner, right? There's no winning career. You can get a promotion, sure, but there's no winning career. And there's no winning in business. And so beating your competition is actually based on what? Based on revenues, profit? Based on what? 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, the lifespan of the company? Like what? It's all nonsense. It's all made up. And so we spend so much time reacting to what another player has done rather than focusing on how we can improve. And so one of the things that I've learned is to completely eliminate this idea of having competitors, which is I have no competitors in my space, none. There are other players who do what I do. And some of those players do some of the things that I do better than me. And those players are my worthy rivals. And it is better to respect and study your worthy rivals because their strengths reveal to you your weaknesses. And if you can have your weaknesses revealed to you, that means you can work on your weaknesses. Because ultimately, as individuals or as organizations, we're in a state of constant improvement. That's all we're trying to do, is be better today than we were yesterday, be better tomorrow than we were today. That's all this game is, whether it's your life, your relationships, your business, whatever it is, it's a game of constant improvement. And so to obsess about beating your competition actually takes us away from constant improvement, because it might make us do something short-term, or it might make us do something expedient because it gives us a short-term leg up, or use cheaper ingredients, or trick somebody, or, because it can drive revenues. And all that does is weaken our own organization. That's all it does. That's all it does. And so I don't think of competitors at all. I think of worthy rivals. And by the way, worthy rivals can change. I get to pick who they are, and I get to pick the reasons that they're my worthy rivals. And I'm in a state of constant improvement thanks to them. And sometimes it's something small and sometimes it's something big. But I'm grateful to all those who do similar things to me because it makes me a better player. I've learned that courage is not some deep internal fortitude, that you don't dig down deep and find the courage. That courage is external. Courage comes from the relationships we have, those around us. A partner in business, a personal relationship, our team, because our team believes in us, which gives us courage to do difficult things. A trapeze artist, a world-famous trapeze artist, would never try a brand new death-defying act for the very first time without a net. Now, all that courage, they're the world's greatest trapeze artists, but they need something external before they do something very dangerous. And it's the same for the rest of us. So when we have someone who says, I believe in you, I got your back, even if this doesn't work out, I'm here with you.
What is that optimist mindset means?
So I think there's a great misunderstanding of what optimism and what an optimist is. I think people think optimism and blind positivity are the same thing, and they're not. Blind positivity, everything's good, everything's fine, everything's good, which a lot of leaders think they have to do. They think they have to be positive all the time to keep their team motivated, inspired. And the reality is that actually backfires, because when we're going through stress, we see our leader always positive, we think there's something wrong with us. It actually backfires. Optimism is different. Optimism is not naive. Optimism is very realistic. Optimism is the undying belief that the future is bright. And we can be in a dark tunnel and say, these are hard times, and I do not know how long we will be here. I do not know how far away that light is, but I know that if we work together, we will come out of this better than we went in. Optimism, again, is about the future, but it is absolutely accepting of difficulty and stress in the current day.
I did a little experiment with a homeless person. Not like on them, it's not like electrodes. With them, voluntarily helped me. Because the whole idea of giving, right? You've all walked down the street and you've all seen someone begging, and you either have or haven't thrown a few pennies in their cup. When you do, you feel good. You bought that feeling. That is a legitimate commercial transaction. Commercial transactions are defined as the exchange of consideration. There was an exchange of consideration here. You gave money, you got the feeling of goodwill. You paid for that feeling. If you didn't give money, you either feel nothing or you feel bad. You can't feel good by not giving, all right? You paid for that feeling. So now the question is, how is that person encouraging us to give? The joke is, they act like every corporation in the world. They talk about themselves. Me, 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 right? Like they sit there with their little outdoor advertising, little sign, right? And it says, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, I got 12 kids, I'm a veteran, God bless. They got it all in there, trying to appeal to somebody, the religious vote, the veteran vote, the child sympathizer, surround yourself with lots of pets, go for that one too, right? All in an attempt to get something from someone. Takers, not givers, right? All about me. Well, what do corporations do? We've added more RAM, we've added more ROM, we've added more speed. This one's number one. We're the biggest, we're the best. We've been around since 1969. We're better than them, we're faster than them. We're more efficient than that one. Me, 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 me. And so even if we buy their product, guess what? I don't really feel much. So I did this little experiment. I found a nice homeless lady on the streets of New York who's willing to help out. And I learned that with her sign, which was pretty typical, I'm homeless, I'm hungry, blah, 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 she makes between $20 and $30 a day for her day's worth of work, 8 to 10 hours of sitting there selling goodwill. 8 to 10 hours, she'll make $20 to $30. $30 is considered a good day. I changed her sign, and the new sign made her $40 in 2 hours. And then she left. It's one of the reasons she's homeless is because she's decided that she only needs $20 to $30 a day to live. If she stayed, she would have made $150. The point is she made $40 in 2 hours. What did the sign say? The sign said, if you only give once a month, please think of me next time. It has nothing to do with the taker. It has everything to do with the giver. And what are the objections people give when they don't give? I can't give to everyone. How do I know that they really need it? And so I addressed both those concerns. I know you can't give to everyone. So if you only give once a month, my cause is legitimate. I will still be here when you're ready to give. $40, 2 hours. Make it about them, not about you. The fact of the matter is 100% of customers are people.
And 100% of clients are people. And 100% of employees are people. I don't care how good your product is. I don't care how good your marketing is. I don't care how good your design is. If you don't understand people, you don't understand business. We are social animals. We are human beings, and our survival depends on our ability to form trusting relationships. Do you ever watch Deadliest Catch on the Discovery Channel? I was flipping through the channels one night, and Deadliest Catch came on. And on this episode, just random, they were in a huge storm. Now, for those of you who don't know Deadliest Catch, they take these crab fishing boats out in the Bering Sea, which is like terrible, and they put cameras on them, and we watch, right? The reason that's, I guess, significant is because these crab fishermen have, I think, one of the top 5 deadliest jobs in the world. You know, I don't know what the exact number is, but dozens of fishermen die every year doing this. We apparently find that entertaining, which it actually is. So they have cameras only on 5 or 6 of the ships, even though there are many, many, many ships that go out fishing every season, and they don't really come into proximity with each other because the ocean's huge, and they usually sabotage each other and give each other false information because they're all competitors. They're all looking to get the crabs and make sure that they find them and somebody else doesn't. And it's business, right? It's just business. It's okay. We all do the same thing in our own companies. And in this one episode, this big, huge storm was so violent that they had to bring all the pots, which are the big cages that they catch the crabs in. They had to bring all the pots back on the boat and wait out the storm. And just by dumb luck, one of the boats that had cameras on it was in proximity of a boat that didn't have cameras on it. And so they had secured all their pots on the deck, and so they started filming the other boat. And they filmed a guy climbing on the outside of the cage, securing the pots. And all of a sudden, a huge wave hits the side of the boat, and the guy's not there anymore. And the people on the boat with the cameras start screaming, "Man overboard, man overboard, man overboard." And they turn their boat towards where they think he might be. He's a stranger. They don't know him. They don't know the crew members of the other boat. And yet they react. And they turn towards him. And they find him in the drink. And for those of you who don't understand how dangerous this is, if the water is so cold that if you're in the water for, I think that it's a minute or a minute 30, hypothermia will set in and you die. And they come upon him, and he's screaming, "Don't let me die, don't let me die." And they pull him on board, not out of the woods yet. They strip off his clothes because it's wet and cold, and they wrap blankets around him to prevent hypothermia from setting in. And he survives. And it's overwhelming. And the captain comes down, and this is all on, you can go watch it on TV. The captain comes down, and he hugs this stranger, this young man, his competitor. He hugs this guy as if he's his own son. I lost it. Everybody is crying. And you realize what happened here was a human interaction. And the reason they risk their own lives to help this other person, even though they spend every other day trying to get ahead and sabotage, is because at the end of the day, they're all crab fishermen. And they know something about each other. And they know something about the risk that they all take to do this. And when push comes to shove, they will put themselves out there to help each other for no other reason than they get it. They're one of the same. I will promise you that every single member of that crew that day went home with a feeling of fulfillment. I promise you that every single person on that crew that day felt more good in their hearts and in their jobs than the richest days that they've ever pulled in. My question is what are you doing to help the person next to you? Don't you want to wake up and go to work for the only reason that you can do something good for someone else? Wouldn't you want them to do that for you?
You can't incentivize results. You can't do that. You can only incentivize the behavior that will achieve a certain result. And if it's only about the short term, then guess what? You're going to drive a behavior that drives short term. And so in your case, what are the behaviors that you're recognizing and rewarding? And so if people are getting bonused only for hitting numbers, and they're not getting bonused for how they do business, then you're going to incentivize a certain behavior. So I'll give you an example. So young in my career, I worked at an ad agency, and I was the junior dog's buddy to the junior dog's buddy. And it was traditional for a big new business pitch that the senior folks would run the pitch. Well, it happened to be around Christmas time, and all the senior folks went on vacation. And so me and one other junior person who were left behind because we didn't go on vacation were told to prepare the war room, which basically means take a conference room and fill it up with all the research. Well, that took a few hours, right? But we still had a week. And so she and I decided to write the whole pitch. We went through all the research and we came up with a strategy and we wrote the pitch. All the senior leaders came back, we presented our work, and they actually used our strategy in this new business pitch. And we lost the pitch, we didn't win. And I got a huge promotion. My boss actually moved me up 2 levels inside the company because he wasn't rewarding my performance, he was awarding and rewarding my initiative. By giving me a promotion for taking the risk to do the extra work, guess what I did after that? Took more risks and did more work, even if it meant winning or losing didn't become the primary factor for me. It was the initiative but that wasn't because of me and my innate anything. That's because that's the behavior my boss wanted from me. And so I think what happens when we get big is we do become too obsessed with the result, and we don't consider the behavior. There are some brilliant people making big decisions who may have missed the number or may have missed the goal, but we gave them nothing, which sends a subconscious message to the rest of the company, which is, if you hit your numbers, you'll do well here. If you don't hit your numbers, we don't care how you do it, as long as, so you get the point. So I think it happens, big companies need to go back and reevaluate how they recognize and reward. And if you want risk taking, then recognize the people taking risks, even when they fail.
How can we ensure that we're changing with times, technology, culture, politics, and tastes, rather than just trying to beat our competitor? And you see it across industries. Publishing, for example. The internet showed up and they saw it and they thought it was nice. And they, as it took on, they sort of, I guess they were interested in it. They sort of played defense. And then Amazon showed up and Amazon went to all of them and said, hey, you want to invest in us? And they all said no. Well, now they're all playing catch up. They're all playing defense. Netflix went to Blockbuster and said, want to buy us? And Blockbuster said no. The rest of the TV and movie industry were too busy comparing who had higher ratings, and they completely missed the fact that Netflix has now completely reinvented television. I find that fascinating. General Motors was destroying its own electric vehicles to protect its old business, and now they're all rushing to catch up with Tesla. I think this is hilarious. And it's the little companies, the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Teslas, that get ignored, that aren't seen as a threat, that end up defining and redefining entire marketplaces. Now, this is not unique to small companies. Big companies can absolutely redefine. The problem is big companies are more obsessed with their finite goals. Big companies are more obsessed with beating their competitors, and little companies are obsessed with their vision. Little companies are obsessed with this outsized vision that outstrips the resources they have, right? Somebody says, we're going to do this, and everybody looks around and goes, well, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the talent for that. I guess we'll have to be creative. And I think this is one of the opportunities for big companies. As they get big, their visions get smaller. They become goals that they can just do a back plan for. There's nothing inherent that a big company shouldn't be innovative. But to your point before, they become risk averse. They become stable. And at the end of the day, it takes huge vision. What I imagine is a huge corporation, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, that someone will say, we imagine a world that's so crazy and so idealistic that in this large corporation, they all look around and go, we don't have the money for that. We don't have the talent for that. I guess we'll have to be creative, which scares the heck out of the investor community. But remember, all of those companies were founded by, whether it's your Steve Jobs or all of these companies, Salesforce, they all started by young people who had no experience and only had vision. And I think there's no reason why big companies cannot be innovative, but I think it's about pushing their own boundaries and allowing for entrepreneurship. And inherent in entrepreneurship is failure. You can't experiment without failing. I remember talking to a CFO of a big company once, and he told me that he has 2 priorities for the company. innovation and efficiency. I said, good luck with that. There's nothing efficient about innovation because you have to keep trying something over and over again. There's nothing efficient about that. And for some reason, I don't know what it is, companies are obsessed with growth. And everybody, they brag, we're a hyper growth company. Show me one article, not 10, not 15, show me one article that shows any data that hyper growth is good for business and good for the company. There is no data to show that companies who are obsessed with growth actually build stronger companies, because they don't. And so it is a fool's errand that is promoted usually by an incentive structure that rewards short-term benefits. I think what companies can do is start to look at their incentive structures and start rewarding things like teamwork, ethics, and long-term gain. And guess what? You'll get the behavior you reward.
If we don't have a sense of purpose, then you're doing the thing you're doing just for the sake of doing it. I'm making money just for the sake of money. I'm turning this wrench just for the sake of turning this wrench. And when we do things that contribute to something else, contribute to something bigger, it gives our lives and our work meaning. And when we have a sense of meaning, when we have a sense of purpose, it does many, many things to us. It builds our self-confidence. It makes us better decision makers. It makes us better in relationships. And at the end of the day, it makes us enjoy our lives and find fulfillment in our work. And I think so often, a lot of people don't think about it this way. They don't think about what's the purpose of all of this. We usually default to, I gotta pay my bills. That's a function because I was told to do it, because everybody has to work, or because I wanna make this company the biggest or the best. To what end? To what value? And so to truly understand purpose, I think, like I said, it sort of just has positive effects all over the place.
I sort of reject the concept of blunt honesty. You can be honest without being an ass. Do I look fat in these jeans? I like the other jeans better. That's an honest assessment without making somebody feel bad, for example. And we also have to get good at evaluating someone's personality. Some people are more sensitive than others. And so a good leader is able to adapt their style and how they offer information so that sometimes they have to be a little more polite to some and they can be a little more blunt with another because their personalities can take it. What we want people to do is hear the feedback, hear the input, and it's based on how they receive it, not how we like to give it. We have to be the adaptable ones as leaders. But he's absolutely right that good leadership starts with care. And I hear this all the time, unfortunately, which is, as a leader, I didn't get to choose my team, so why should I care about them, or why should I trust them? I didn't choose them. Well, you didn't get to choose your children. You love them, and this is one of the risks of leadership. Leaders have to take the risk to care. They have to take the risk to trust first. I've never in my life heard a great leader say, "Prove to me why I should trust you," to their team. It's the opposite. A leader takes the risk to trust, and it's the team who says, "Prove to us why we should trust you." That's the correct hierarchy. So yes, you do have to care. You want to see your people as human beings first. They are not the problem. They may have a problem, and inject a little empathy into the organization. This is what reflects care. So for example, I'll give you one example. So here's a pretty normal scenario. Somebody walks into an office and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. If you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. Empathy changes that. You walk into their office and you say, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm worried about you. That's empathetic. That's the expression of care, that we recognize that someone may have a problem, but they are not the problem.
Leaders need to model behavior, like parents need to model behavior. So for example, I'll give you a company says, we believe in integrity and always telling the truth. And then the phone rings and, an assistant picks up the phone and the executive says, tell him I'm not in. Well, congratulations, you've just sanctioned lying, And so it's one thing to write it on the wall. It's another thing to actually practice the thing that's written on the wall. So modeling the behavior is absolutely essential because your actions will speak much louder than your words. And the stories do matter. Stories are much more powerful than statistics. What did Stalin say? I'm quoting Stalin. The death of one man is the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of a million is a statistic.
Interesting.
I think he said it the other way around. The death of a million men is a statistic, the one of them is a tragedy. And I'll give you a real life example, just to put it into. So let's say something like, okay, so COVID ravaged the world. Some would argue expectedly, some would argue unexpectedly, but it happened. And over the course of just over a year, 600,000 people in the United States alone have lost their lives. Many women, children, and fathers, and mothers, and families destroyed by this horrible virus. Okay, that's true, right? Here's story number 2. I know this young woman who lives in Southern California. Her name is Cami Yoder. Cami was driving home from work one day, and she turned the corner and came upon a car accident that had just happened. The ambulance hadn't arrived yet. A 17-year-old driver accidentally hit an 18-year-old pedestrian with her car. The girl was lying on the street, one of her legs at an uncomfortable angle, a 90-degree angle. Cami pulled over her car, got out. Thank goodness she actually knows basic first aid. She performed CPR on the young girl to keep her alive until the paramedics arrived. Eventually the paramedics came, they took over from Cami, and they took the girl to the hospital. A couple of days later, Cami was curious what had happened to her, and she went on the blotter. She went online and found out that the young girl had actually died. Which was more powerful to you, the death of 600,000 people or the death of one young girl in California?
The second.
And the second one gave you goosebumps. The first one didn't. And that's the point, which is, what's the difference between 500,000 people dead or 600,000 people to 650,000 people dead? It emotionally moves us zero. But when you tell the story of a person who is an example of what happens, if we tell the story of one death of COVID and how it's affected that family, the emotional impact is vastly more powerful than simply relaying statistics and numbers. And so yes, I do believe that part of being a good leader is not just the intent, but part of good leadership is the ability to communicate. Those things I think are inextricably linked. And learning how to tell a story, quite frankly, that captures the value of your work. Because people can relay those stories much easier than they can relay or remember the statistics.
Throughout the organization.
Throughout the organization.
Story gets passed down,
Correct.
sometimes generations.
Generationally. And great organizations, like great cultures, have myth. You know, there's stories that have been passed down generations in nations about the founding.
Yeah.
You know, the Marine Corps celebrates their birthday every year. There's debate whether that's actually even their birthday or not. It doesn't even matter, right? And it becomes part of the culture. These stories become ingrained. You know, George Washington and the cherry tree. Yeah, was it a cherry tree? Yeah. They become ingrained in the fabric of the nation. So too do they become ingrained in the fabric of the company. And like religion, like anything, it's the stories that capture the morals and values much better than just writing them on the wall. We have to have trusting teams. I was on a business trip in Las Vegas, and they put me up at the Four Seasons, beautiful hotel. And one of the reasons it's a beautiful hotel is not simply because of the fancy bed. Any hotel can buy a fancy bed. It's because of the people who work there. That when they say hello to you, you get the distinct sense that they wanted to say hello, not that they were told to say hello. We're highly attuned social animals. We can tell the difference. They happened to have a coffee bar in the lobby. And so one afternoon, I went to buy myself a cup of coffee, and the barista working that day was a young man named Noah. Noah was funny. He was engaging. I enjoyed buying a cup of coffee from him. I stood there for far too long buying a cup of coffee just because I enjoyed talking to Noah. So as is my nature, I asked Noah, "Do you like your job?" And without skipping a beat, Noah says to me, "I love my job." Now, in my line of business, that's significant. Like is rational. I like the people, I like the challenge, I get paid well, I like my job. Love is emotional. It demonstrates an emotional connection to whatever we're doing. Do you love your wife? I like her a lot. It's a different standard, right? Noah said, I love my job. So immediately, I'm interested. So I follow up. I said to Noah, tell me specifically what the Four Seasons is doing that you would say to me, you love your job. And again, without skipping a beat, Noah said that throughout the day, managers will walk past him and ask him how he's doing. Ask him if there's anything that he needs to do his job better. Not just his manager, any manager. And then he said, I also work for a different hotel. And there, the managers walk past me and catch me if I'm doing something wrong. There, they're always overbearing and trying to make sure that I make my numbers. He says, there, I just like to get through the day, keep my head below the radar, and just collect my paycheck. He said, only at the Four Seasons do I feel I can be myself. This is the exact same human being, and yet the level of performance will be completely different, not because of him, but because of the leadership environment in which he's working. I get this question all the time. Simon, how do we get the most out of our people? They're not a towel that we wring them to see how much we can get out of them. The question is flawed. The correct question is, what environment do I have to create? What do I have to do to help my people work at their natural best? That's called leadership. And when we can create a trusting team, teams in which people feel trusted and trusting, what will happen is it makes them feel safe enough to raise their hand and say, I made a mistake. Or I'm having trouble at home and it's affecting my work. Or you've promoted me to a position that I don't know what I'm doing and I need more training. Or I need help, or I'm scared. If we do not have trusting teams, what we have is a group of people who show up to work every single day, lying, hiding, and faking. They hide all of the mistakes for fear of getting in trouble. They won't admit that they don't know what they're doing for fear that they'll be humiliated. They're certainly not going to say that they're scared or that they need help for fear that it will somehow reduce their value inside the organization. And eventually, things will compound and break.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag Believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome.
For 10 more amazing rules from Gary Vaynerchuk, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
I try to be great, but deep down, I don't have to keep up a facade. Content, happy, at peace. All of those three things are way better than a verified account with tens of millions of followers, way better